Hey, how's it going? It is, what time is it? It is 9:25 and we are live on a Monday night, ready to kick off our Monday night stream. We've got the intermission music going. We've got Final Fantasy 14 loaded up and ready to go. But before I got started too far into tonight's stream, I wanted to take a little bit of time and talk about returning to an MMO because it's an interesting topic, I think, and one that I wish more developers would spend a little time spending more time about. So I don't have my headphones on yet. I'll put my headphones on here in just a little bit, and we'll queue up and do some dailies, what have you, and get going here in a little bit. And I suspect Mr. Anderson will be logging on and joining us here relatively soon too. But what I wanted to talk about, so as you guys know, if you've been following the channel here at all, for the last couple of weeks, actually about the last 4 weeks, I've been spending a little bit of time in 3 different MMOs, trying to decide which one I was going to spend the rest of the time in for the summer. And I started off, went back to ESO, and I played a week of ESO. Actually, I went back to Final Fantasy 14 first, and I played, well, hello there. Played a week of Final Fantasy 14 on the free week that they give you if you've ever been a subscriber, but you're not currently subscribing. And I just did some low-level, I picked up a low-level character and started a new character, kind of a throwaway character, and leveled her through 2 separate classes to level 15. And that was all well and good. And then I went and I spent a little time in ESO. It's been a week there. And then I went and spent a little bit of time in World of Warcraft, a game of which I'm intimately familiar with and I spent years playing. But I hadn't played recently in quite a while because pretty much since the beginning of the year, first I played all the way through Anthem, and then I played tons of the Division 2. And then we futzed around with some other games miscellaneous here and there. So, but coming back to Final Fantasy, so I decided, hey, you know, once they released the benchmark tool, and I got a chance to make a Viera, and I really kind of felt like, you know what, I'm ready to come back to Final Fantasy. I haven't played since I reached the end of the Stormblood expansion, but that was before even the first Stormblood patch had come out. So the last time I played was, I think, in 2017, perhaps, maybe a little bit in 2018. But I'd gone all the way through the content that was current at that point. And was really just doing in-game content. So as I often do when I'm doing in-game content, I moved off and went to go do other things. So it's been probably a year and a half or so since I played, but I do have a level 70 character that is ready to be played. And I have a max level character in ESO, and I have a max level character in World of Warcraft. And it's always sort of difficult when you come back to one of these games. It's like, how do you pick back up and how do you get back into the game? It's daunting and more than a little bit intimidating and quite frankly off-putting, which is why a lot of people, I've asked this question around other people and I've got the same response, which is what I do oftentimes, which is we log back in to this game and we open up our inventory and like, here's my inventory, right? You open up and you look at this and you're like, holy crap, what am I supposed to do with all this stuff? And you just don't even want to mess with it. And then you open up your ability bars, and you can see my ability bars here, and I've got 3 rows of abilities that I don't remember how in the hell they work. And then in this case, if you Control I, and then I've got my armory. My armory is actually cleaned out because I spent a whole bunch of time Sunday cleaning it all out. But all of these panels, when I logged back in, were all filled with dozens of items. And then you, in Final Fantasy 14, it's even more intimidating because then you've got retainers, and the retainers in themselves have, sorry, what am I on there? Have tabs upon tabs of inventory, right? That's one retainer's inventory. Oh, and if that weren't enough, oops, wrong one there. You've got saddlebag inventory because your chocobo has saddlebags. So it's not like they don't give you enough inventory space. They give you tons of inventory space in Final Fantasy 14. It's a subscription game. They're not going to make you pay to the for inventory space. Although you can pay to get more bag space by paying to get more retainers. Different story altogether. But in short, you come back and you've got 3 bars worth of abilities that you don't remember how they work. And you've got pages on pages full of crap in your inventory that you're not sure how is relevant or not relevant. So how do you come back to a game like that, and do you come back? Well, so I want to tell you what I did and share with you sort of the process that I went through coming back to Final Fantasy 14, and it's actually worked pretty well, and I think I'm going to sort of adhere to this process going forward when I go away from an MMO and then I decide to come back. And it's going to happen over a couple of period of days, but I do think it actually works out really pretty well. So here's the thought. First of all, when you come back to an MMO that you've been gone from a long time, I honestly do think the best thing to do is to start fresh with a throwaway character. and understanding that it is a throwaway character. You're not necessarily looking to start all over again. You're not looking to do, but you want to get your feet back into the game. And the beginning of an MMO, when the inventory is small, is light, and the abilities are light, and the class is light, just getting re-familiar with the rhythm and the flow of the game at that level is extraordinarily educational. For instance, everything in Final Fantasy XIV has a 1.5 second cooldown on the global cooldown (GCT). So the pace of combat in Final Fantasy XIV is much different than it is against something like Elder Scrolls Online, where there's literally no cooldown on anything, or not much of a cooldown. Everything is stamina and magicka based, and a number of your abilities are used by left-clicking, literally left-clicking and right-clicking on the mouse are your primary and secondary attacks for your main weapon. So getting just back into the feel of the game and getting that rhythm and that flow down is super important, and a new low-level character is the way to do that. But the trick here, and here's the discipline, is to not fall in love with that character, but understand that it's a low-level character, and spend a week or so, just about a week, about 5 days, playing that character through every night until you're familiar with the game, and then set that character aside, and then start the process of getting yourself re-familiar with your max level character, because ultimately that's really what you want to do. You want to kind of be back in that groove of playing that content, especially if there's a new expansion coming out, especially as in the case with Final Fantasy XIV, where you need to be at the end of all the current content in order to even take advantage of the new content and the new expansion. And Final Fantasy XIV is unapologetic about that. They release new content, they're basically saying, you want to get to that content, new expansion? Well, you need to play through all the content that comes before you, and do so in a linear fashion before you're going to step foot in those new zones. That's just how they are. When I bought Stormblood, I hadn't played through Heavensward yet, even though I had bought Heavensward. Hey, Tristan! It does look a little bit like WoW, although you'll see as we play further, as we get further along, you can see the distinct differences. So, as you're getting back in familiar with that, it's like, all right, well, now you need to kind of get back familiar with that thing. What I did was I logged back in with my Red Mage, and the first step, break it up into parts. Spend the first couple of days getting familiar with your abilities. Don't worry about your inventory. Just put your inventory on side. Chances are, when you logged off at last, when you left the game at last, the character was in a pretty good shape, and even if its bags were overflowing, your decision right now, you don't know enough about the game right now to make good decisions about what you need to delete and throw away. So, but spend some time just getting really familiar with that character. Go out into an open world, find some mobs that are 8 to 10 levels below you, so that you're not challenged really in any way, and just use that time to get really familiar with your rotation and how your abilities work. If you need to, bring up a YouTube video and kind of look through the thing. But I spent almost 2 hours Sunday evening doing just that, essentially getting really familiar with the character and the rotation and my abilities, and I had to look them all up. I forgot that Red Mages had this thing called dual cast, which basically means that every other spell I cast has no cast time. So it's really important about, but multiple of the casts have 3 and 4 second cast timers. So it's really important that those spells get activated when the dual cast is up, and you don't try to do them when the dual cast is down. And I'd forgotten all that about Red Mage. I remembered it once I remembered it, as the saying goes. But while I was learning it, I had to kind of relearn that information and that stuff. Red Mage is a flaky rotation. I love it once you get the rhythm of it. And I suspect Dancer is going to be even flakier. But it's not just a push the button that comes up next, because if you do, you're going to be spending a lot of time in extraordinarily long cast timers, and you're not going to play the class very well. Plus, there was all the ancillary stuff that I had to learn about where my offensive cooldowns were, where my defensive cooldowns were, how they were, what they worked, where's all my support abilities like Mana Shift and Resurrect and Cure, some of the things that Red Mages can do. So a lot of that stuff, I kind of spent time learning, and I spent about 2.5 hours, 3 hours, just fighting mobs over and over again, going through the rotation until I finally felt good about the rotation. The next thing I did was I queued for a low-level dungeon, one that I knew that I'd be familiar with. I didn't go with a random queue. I picked specifically one of 3 dungeons that I knew I was already familiar with, and dropped back into that content and went and did those dungeons. Of course, the nice thing about Final Fantasy is when you queue for those dungeons, it scales your abilities down, nice thing or bad thing, depending on the way you look at it. It scales those things down to whatever that level is you are for that dungeon. So these are level 15, 16 dungeons, so it scaled my abilities back as if it were level 15, 16, which means I didn't have to worry about all my abilities to begin with. Also, it reduces the intimidation factor, because everyone in that dungeon realizes that you've only got access to X number of abilities, so it's not like you can know how to use or even are expected to use everything on your bar. Cast the basic buffs and debuffs, get your rotation out, go to the dungeon, remember how to kill to pull mobs, and to practice your rotation with the group in a low-level dungeon. At that point, I was feeling pretty good about my rotation and about my character, and starting to feel like I knew the character fairly well. So then it was the next day, actually most of the next day, that I started then going through my inventory, and that was just a straight-up painful process. It's not great, it's not fun, but there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. My inventory was so full that I couldn't even swap outfits because my armory chest was overflowing. So it was time to buckle down and figure out which armory pieces I was saving because I thought they looked good and I might want to use them for transmogs, which armory pieces were I saving for potential other jobs that I might want to do on this character, or which armory pieces I was saving because I needed them to go on retainers, who you also level like minions, like followers do. So all of that stuff, and just going through all the inventory one piece at a time. But I decided that was a really crucial part of the process as well, and that I didn't need to do it all at one time. So I spent a little bit of time going through my armory, and I got my armory sorted out. Later on this week, probably off stream, I'm going to go through my crafting inventory and get all my crafting inventory sorted out, either sold or put back on the auction house or vendored, or do something with it along those lines. So with that in mind, now that I've got my inventory sorted out, so you can see my armory, there's my inventory. I haven't even tackled this part of my inventory, which is why it still looks like that. But if you look at my armory, so yeah, see now my armory is really slim. Lots of empty slots there, only basically the items that I have assigned to outfits set up, and a few extra pieces that I need to kind of go figure out what I'm going to do with some of these additional rings and earrings, okay? But I feel pretty good. I've got room in my inventory, a little breathing room, as they like to say, and that's what you really want. You want some breathing room in your inventory. So that's my 3-step process for coming back. I hope it's helpful. I hope it's useful. I hope it's sort of a side use. Spend a couple of days playing a low-level character just to get familiar with the game. Spend a couple of hours, however long it takes, an afternoon, killing low-level mobs and doing low-level dungeons until you're familiar with the rotation again. Take that and spend however much time you need getting familiar with your rotation for your character. And then take a couple of hours, a day, whatever it takes, to then tackle your inventory. By that time, you've spent probably about a week in the game. You've gotten much familiar with the economy of the game, what's current, what's not current, and what those items mean and how useful they are and how not useful. And if you don't yet know, well, then at least you can start the process of figuring out how those things are useful and not useful. And that's it.